review, where the lens of this class is to look not at the characters of the stories of the Bible, but to look at the things that they interact with, the objects, and to pick things that actually impact the arc of the story. And we're going to ask questions that, aren't the kind of questions you ask about characters. Like, where did they grow up, and who are their parents, and, what's their job? Like, we're not interested in all those things, like we would be with Abraham or Noah or some other character in the Bible. Instead, we're going to ask questions about the object and allow what are, I would say, deceptively simple questions. Like, I pretend they're simple questions, but they're not. What is it? What is it made of? Who made it? Where is it? There's in both chronologically in the story and geographically in the story. Who has it and interacts with it? Is it a singular thing, or are there many of them? Is it rare, meaning valuable, or is it somehow ordinary, an ordinary thing that you or I might have? When we ask when and where is it in the story, we're going to also ask, and when we ask who interacts with it, we're going to ask, how does this object move the story forward? In other words, if this object weren't there, would the story be the same? And how would the story be different if this object weren't there? And then lastly, we're going to ask two more amorphous questions. One is, what does this object mean? Because things have meaning. They're not just things. I have here a simple example. It's a hammer. Actually, more a mallet. This has some meaning. And if I show up with it and I'm like, right, it shows up here in this place in the story, well, that thing means something. Without it, right, all of a sudden the story is very different. Now, that thing conveys meaning in the story. So we're going to ask, what meaning? Why this thing? And what does it mean? And then we're going to ask, where is it now? Because these are objects. They have, in the story, they have physical, tangible reality. We're going to ask, whatever happened to this object, and where is it now? Okay? Last time we talked about the tree at the center of the Garden of Eden. That obviously drives the story forward, because if that tree were not there, there would be no humanity. Adam and Chava would have lived in unreproductive bliss in the Garden of Eden, and that would have been it. There would be no story, no Torah, no us. So that tree, as it turns out, which is a unique tree, there's only one of them, and it comes into the story and then disappears behind fiery, cherubs who guard it. That tree moves the story forward pretty significantly. Okay. Now, today's item. Good. Any questions up to there? That's a pretty good review, yes? Okay, good. All right, here we go. Here's today's text. The coat of many colors. Have you all seen the play, the Technicolor, Joseph in his Technicolor Dreamcoat? I'm not going to sing for you today and perform, but it's interesting because we have an image. If you've seen that play, you have an image of what this garment looks like. And at least for now, I want you to dismiss that image. Okay, it's not a big, giant, circular rainbow that everybody holds out and sings pop songs, right? That's not a disrespect to the play, but it's a pop culture reference that I don't want to cloud our Torah lens yet. And I'm going to show you a couple of more classical artistic interpretations of Joseph's coat also in a little bit, not yet, so as not to cloud how we think about it. All right, does someone want to read here?
I'll read.
All right.
Now Jacob was settled in the land where his father had sojourned, the land of Canaan.
Okay, wait, we got to pause right there. Okay. That's actually very crucial information. We know where we are. Jacob did not live his whole life in the land of Canaan. The land of Canaan is the land of Israel. It's where Abraham settles. So when it says he was now settled in the land where his father, Isaac, who never left that land, by the way, so he has gone away and come back to the land of his ancestors. And he already has children, because we're going to see this then is the line of Jacob. So we're encountering Jacob later in his life. This is not Jacob, the young man before he's married. This is Jacob, who is now the landowner, the homesteader, back in the land where his fathers had sojourned, and he has children. Okay, keep going.
This then is the line of Jacob. At 17 years of age, Joseph tended the flocks with his brothers as a helper to the sons of his father's wives, Bilhah and Zilpah.
Okay,
And Joseph,
wait, hold on. I'm sorry, that's just how I do, like we're going to do a little close reading here, right? Because we don't have a lot of text about this object. So its location is going to matter. It's interesting, it says, this is the line of Jacob, but it starts actually with one of Jacob's youngest children, Joseph, almost the youngest. And I don't know, when you say, this is the line of Neil and Sharon Norrie, you start with my older brothers, and then you get to me as the youngest brother. That's just sort of normal, right? Where are all those other brothers? They're not mentioned here. So we already know that somehow this is a story about Joseph, and that Joseph is going to be unique in this story. And it is Joseph's uniqueness, of course, that is both the plus and the minus, and that's the rub of this story. He's 17, Joseph. This is before all of the rest of his life happens, and he becomes Joseph, the dreamer, and Joseph, the vizier of Egypt. That's way down the line. He is still a child. And he works as a helper to his brothers, because of course they are the ones who are really doing the work, and to a specific set of brothers, the brothers who were born by Bilhah and Zilpah, not the two principal mothers, Rachel and Leah, but the two concubines, who are nonetheless mothers of many of those people. Okay, and what does Joseph do? Keep reading.
And Joseph brought bad reports of them to their father.
Dum, 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 right? I mean, that is like the thing. See, it's been this very nice pastoral scene, like, oh, okay, here we are. Jacob is settled. It's the land of his ancestors. Joseph is tending sheep. All that is very nice. And here's his father's wives, these two nice people. But there's a fly in the ointment. Joseph, I don't know, how would you say? What is this? What does Joseph do?
He tattled.
He tattles, right. What happens to snitches?
Usually not good things.
It's not good things. That's right. Snitches don't get riches, right? I guess like that's not the yeah.
They sleep with the fishes.
They sleep with the fishes, right? This is like so Joseph is not the good guy here. This is not a nice thing he's doing. And yet, the very next sentence says, keep going.
Now Israel loved Joseph best of all his sons, for he was the child of his old age, and he had made him an ornamented tunic. Okay,
there we go. There's a lot of good information in here, right? Yisrael, meaning Jacob. That's the other name for Jacob, especially later in his life. Remember, this is late in Jacob's life. Jacob is an old man now. His children are grown. He still loves Joseph the most. Is that a good thing?
No.
Generally, I think we're supposed to read it, no, it's not a good thing. Now, it may be true, right? Because he demonstrates that love. And the text is quite clear here. There is a direct connection between the preferential feelings that Jacob has for Joseph and this clothing. He made him an ornamented tunic. Do the other children have one of these tunics? No, they do not. Is this a normal, ordinary t-shirt kind of tunic? No, it is not. Right now, what does this tunic mean?
That you're the favorite.
Yes, but I want to say it depends who you ask. What does this mean to Jacob? Suzanne, if you were speaking, we couldn't hear you. What does it mean to Jacob? This cloak is like when I gave my son a pocket watch that belonged to me when I was younger. This is like a conveyance of love for Jacob. He wants to show Joseph something. Now, he's maybe doing it the wrong way, but this coat means I love you, and I love you most. To Joseph, it means I'm the favorite. Dun, 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 dun. I can even talk bad about my brothers. What does it mean to his brothers? Are you kidding me? Daddy bought you a Jaguar? What? Daddy never bought me a Jaguar. What's going on? And now imagine if your brother who got the Jaguar is a snitch. That all of a sudden that cloak means something really bad. Imagine every time Jacob sees it, it makes him think of the child he bore in his old age. Yosef, the extra measure, the more. Yosef means more. It's like Musa, the additional, the icing on the cake. Every time Joseph sees it, he is reminded that he is better than his brothers. And every time his brothers see it, they are reminded of how much they hate him and what a complete jerk he is. It's a meaningful quote. Yeah, Ella.
Could it also be a symbol of what Jacob was saying, that he is going to be the leader, the head of the family when I pass away?
Right. So now we want to think about clothing as a means to convey authority. Because you are right, Yosef is going to become the most, meaningful, as it were, the star child, in more ways than one. And it does seem as if Jacob intends to deputize him. Think about a general's clothing and how it looks different, epaulets and things, right? Decorations, right? Those decorations convey something very substantial, important, actually. I mean, everybody does actually have to know who's in charge. And, all those things about when generals would put away all of their brass when they were actually out in the field so that snipers don't pick off the officers. And they would say, don't salute me. They see you saluting me, they're going to shoot me. Right? So that conveyance of authority through symbols. Yes, Cynthia.
Is there any significance in that they call him Yisrael when he does this? All along they've been calling him Jacob. And all of a sudden...
It does. The significance is it reminds you that he is older, that he has survived the wrestling with the angel, that he is now resettled, coming back, things coming to haunt, coming back to roost. Remember, Jacob is also the preferred child, who also got a unique blessing, who also was preferred by parents. And it didn't necessarily go great for him. And yet he does seem to be repeating the sins of the father.
Right. He's not necessarily, he may be older, but he's not any wiser. And while it ended tragically for him, it's going to end tragically for Joseph too, because putting the youngest child as the heir apparent over the older brothers isn't done in those times, and is extremely insulting to the others. Even if Joseph wasn't a snitch.
Right. Even if he was nice, it would be hard. Right. But if you were the dad trying to figure it out, you would say, I got to prepare my young kid so that he doesn't get all cocky about it. Not, hey, let's prop him up artificially when he's really unprepared and rub all the other guy's nose in it. Maybe.
So what is the Torah telling us by repeating that kind of pattern over and over again?
It's the overturning of primogenitor is, it means to say those things only count so much, and that when God chooses who will be the line, that's it. Not a birth order. If there's any solid lesson we can learn, it's that the firstborn is not guaranteed their place when God wills it otherwise. All right, I want to move forward a little bit. All right, here we go. And of course, we know this. I'll just finish up that last verse 4.
And when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of his brothers, they hated him, so that they could not speak a friendly word to him.
Right. when they saw ki oto ahav vayisneu oto, when it was him who was loved, it's they who hated him. I mean, it's almost poetically crafted there. The impact of this cloak is it bred hatred between the brothers. I mean, what's worse, right? I mean, that's really a terrible thing. Okay, now, verse 3, here's Rashi on verse 3. Because the Hebrew here is, I want us to try to picture this coat. What is it? What is it made of? What made this coat so special? I mean,
Right.
So the word is this word here, pasim. A ketonet is a tunic, meaning it goes over the top. It has sleeve, armholes and and it goes like halfway down the shins and has little vents on the side so you can walk, right? It's still worn in the Middle East by adult men. So it's not a unusual garment. It's tunic. It's actually one of the oldest kinds of garments there is. And very simple one. But this is ketonet pasim. And that word is kind of hard to know what it means, which is why, of course, Rashi asks about it. Rashi always has a problem. When he's commenting on something, he's always responding to, there's something that bothers him. Right? And what bothers him is that word. What's bothering Rashi? Pasim. Pasim is a term for raiment, that's just clothing, of fine wool. And he's quoting from the Talmud. He's quoting a previous understanding. The Talmud in Masechet Shabbat says that. And he says it's similar to this line in the book of Esther, the very first chapter of Esther, where they describe the party that King Achashverosh throws, and how everything was gold and silver, and everybody was dolled up in their finest. Chur, karpas, utechelet. And karpas there is understood to mean fine linen. The same garment is mentioned in 2 Samuel 13:8 in the story of Amnon and Tamar. And we may therefore gather that it was made of very fine material. Now, I don't know if you know the story of Amnon and Tamar, but it's a very problematic story. I don't really want to go down the rabbit hole too much, but let's just say that Amnon mistreats Tamar in a very bad way. So that's not a great story to reference. In other words, the Esther story, not a great thing, right? When this garment shows up, bad, violent stuff happens, seemingly everywhere in the Torah. Wow. Now, what Rashi is saying is, this is just fine material. It's not necessarily a striped or a technicolor. In fact, it may be very plain. Pasim means fine wool, like fine linen. And you can think like a really, like a very fine shawl or something like that, that if you pulled on it hard, it would, it's not meant for work. This isn't work clothes. This is finery. It requires taking care of. So when he's out taking care of the sheep, he's wearing high-heeled shoes to go do farm work, right? I mean, it doesn't make any sense, except to say, oh, I'm above this. It's not manual labor work, even though they are shepherds. And Rashi continues, there's a midrashic statement that in the word pasim, we can see an allusion to all of his misfortunes. And he spells out, this is really interesting, the Midrash plays around here with the letters. The letters of the word pasim are going to stand for 4 different encounters, groups that Joseph encounters badly. Potiphar, that's the guy who gets him thrown in prison in Egypt. The Socharim, the merchants to whom he is sold. the Yishmaelim, the Ishmaelites to whom they sell it to, and the Midyanim who bring him down to Egypt. They're all different people in the story here. And that comes from the Midrash Rabbah on Genesis. So according to Rashi, it's just really nice material. It's Italian wool, right? It's not, nylon fleece. Now, according to Ibn Ezra says it's embroidered. Pasim, like pas, yad, the pas of the hand. A hand decorated, embroidered. A hand embellished garment. So that's a little different. One means it conveys finery. The other conveys kind of expense. But either way, they're both rare. These are rare and expensive garments.
I don't understand where the embroidery is coming from. Where?
The word is
What's in it?
pasim,
Right.
and he says pas yad, pasim, right? He's making a play on the word. He's making a linguistic, historical comment that isn't really necessarily based on linguistics, right? This word sounds like this other word in Aramaic.
So where does,
hand.
I'm sorry, I don't understand where the word pasim is coming from.
The word pasim is how the original text defines it.
Oh,
He
okay.
made for him a ketonet, a tunic pasim. That's the adjective. And we're trying to decide what that adjective means. Did he make for him a delicate tunic?
Okay.
Did he make for him an embroidered tunic? Right, which I would think implies even more expense. Here it's translated ornamented in some way, right? That's taking on the Ibn Ezra comment, not so much Rashi. Okay, let's jump ahead a little bit. The brothers have put him in the pit. All that stuff has happened. Do you want me to read through quickly that part of the story? No, I don't think so. You know what happens. They see him out there. They confront him. They're gonna kill him. But Ruvain steps up and says, no, don't kill him. Let's just throw him in and but of course he knows they're going to have to go back and explain why they don't have him. And they know that their father is going to be very upset because, of course, Joseph is the favorite. So Reuben comes up with this idea. He makes a story. He creates a lie. We're going to tell a lie to our father that will get us out of trouble and sort of solidify what we have done and make it nice and secret. And you can imagine all the brothers who are around being like, okay, everybody has to get our story straight. When we go back and tell Abba what happened, nobody blink, right? Okay. Someone else want to read? This is what they do. And I bring this here because as you can see in the highlighted text, tunic, 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 right? Whenever a word is repeated that many times in that few number of verses, we're supposed to pay attention. It's important. What happened? That garment seems important. And it's essential to the lie which they're going to tell. They believe that they need material support for their lie. And this tunic is going to be it. Okay, who wants to read?
Read.
Yeah, go ahead, Ella.
Then they took Joseph's tunic, slaughtered a kid, and dipped the tunic in the blood. they had the ornamented tunic taken to their father, and they said, "We found this. Please examine it. Is it your son's tunic or not?"
Okay, wait, we got to pause there, right? This is their plan. They're going to play dumb. They're playing dumb.
Okay.
We
He
found this. Hey, look what I found.
So, but it says they had the tunic taken to their father,
Yes,
not that they
Vayishalchu.
took it.
Vayishalchu. They sent it.
Oh, they sent it. So it's a translation.
Yishalchu means, they didn't use FedEx, right? They had it taken. They sent a messenger, right? A shaliach. We still use the same word, right? It doesn't say heviu, vayaviu, that they brought it. It says they had it brought. They had it taken.
Why is that significant? I guess is what I'm asking. That they had it taken there rather than taking it.
Well, they actually say both. It's the text is kind of remarkable. Let's look closely. First of all, you have to sensitize yourself to the fact that this is one of those stories that runs verbs quickly. Vayikhu, and they took the coat. Vayishchetu, and they slaughtered the goat. Vayitbilu, and they dipped the coat. Vayishalchu, and they sent it. Vayaviu, and they brought it. Vayomru, Yikhu, Yishchetu, Yitablu, Yishalchu, Yaviu, Vayomru. This is a plot that is unhatching. It is moving forward quickly. This conveys intention.
Okay.
They have a plan. They're going to do it. And they say, Zot matzanu, we found this. They reveal themselves, though. They're not quite that smart. Because what do they say? They say, look at it. Is this your son's tunic? Why don't they say, we found this. Something must have happened to somebody. They bring up Joseph. They betray themselves really right there. If this were a cop show, one cop would turn to the other and wink like, aha, we didn't say that. That wasn't out in the news. How did you know that detail? Right? But so, okay. And they're
Your son, not my brother.
Your son. Ah, nice. Very nice. Ketonat bincha, your son? Is this right or not? And by the way, let's just imagine for a second that you've seen this cloak before. How many cloaks are there like this one? 0. This is a totally unique garment, custom made, either, ordered custom because of the fine material that would have had to be worked. People would have known about this. It would have cost extra. You would have had to hire someone to card the wool or the linen and to make all the fine thread and to weave it fine and then to sew it fine. I mean, it would have taken months. And if it's embroidered, it would have taken even longer than that. You'd have had to find talented people who knew how to do that. And if it was dyed, well, you'd have had, dye was very expensive. You'd have had to wait until you could secure the materials and have specialized trade of people who know how to dye wool. Or you couldn't just go to the store and buy a fancy cloak. So when they say, hey, I never seen, what is this? Even that is kind of unbelievable. And of course, Ella, continue, verse 33 there.
He recognized it.
Yes, because why did Jacob recognize it, Ella?
Because he had it made. It was unique.
Right, because it's recognizable. It's like, of course I recognize it. And he says,
my son's tunic, a savage beast devoured him. Joseph was torn by a savage beast. Jacob,
by the way, wait, that's the story that they want to tell, but they haven't told that story yet.
Well, I think Jacob just assumed that, seeing the blood on the tunic.
Unless does it mean that Jacob actually was part of the plot?
Well, it's not that he's part of the plot, but maybe if he knows, here's my question for this passage. Does Jacob know? Is he the mark in this? Is he the rube, or does he know? But he is not going to say it if they don't say it, right? Does he really think this, or is he like, oh my, you mean a wild beast? Because of course that sort of is what happened, right? His brothers, Taraf, he's looking right at them. Hi, Mickey. And he's saying, a wild beast, I suppose, must have done it. Wink, wink, Ruvain, Shimon, Levi, who he, at the end of his life, blesses them as violent. This tunic, tunic, tunic. Every time we hear tunic, we know it means violence. What kind of wild animal destroyed my son so much that all you could bring back was this tunic? I mean, like, it's kind of an unbelievable story. I think in some way it could be read as he's letting them know that he knows they're lying.
Do they maybe think they get off easier if they don't verbalize the lie? They
Right.
simply present the garment. They don't say.
Right. If he won't say, we might get away with it. I think that's true. It's kind of what happens, if you recall, with Jacob and Esau, where Isaac is blind. He is deceived, by the way, by a garment, the hairy cloth that Rebecca puts on Yitzchak's arm to make blind Isaac believe that he's Esau. And if you read that text, Yitzchak is like, gee, the touch is Esau, but the voice is Jacob. Right? He knows he's being deceived by his wife and his son. Possibly, I think that's how I read it. Gee, are you sure? I mean, he asked like 2 or 3 times, is it really you? Because he knows. So Jacob has been through this little scenario once before, where an article of clothing is presented to deceive the father in order to uproot the order of the son's priority. Boy,
And to be
Yeah, go ahead.
very mundane about it, had he been in fact torn up by wild beasts, there's no way this delicate cloak would have been preserved intact.
Right. It's like, look, I have hairy arms, but if you put, a sheep, a goat hide, and was like, is it Hillel? Is it you? I mean, like, that's not convincing, right? This is not convincing. And maybe what this cloak really symbolizes is karma for Jacob. Jacob thinks this is something he's giving to Joseph, but really this is something which is going to be used against Jacob. And what does Jacob do, of course, here? Verse 34.
Jacob rent his clothes, put sackcloth on his loins, and observed mourning for his son many days.
He does act like he believes it, and it can be read that he believes it. I'm saying it can be read either way, but the first thing he does is clothing. He tears his clothes, whatever he is wearing. Joseph was torn. And so he tears his clothing and he puts on sack, meaning burlap. He steps into burlap loincloth as a sign of discomfort and mourning. The exact opposite of ketonet pasim, a hand embellished, not a hand torn. I mean, he now clothes himself in the exact opposite clothing, which indicates not preferential treatment, but mourning and loss.
We also don't know if the tunic was torn up, and then the first thing he does is rent his own clothes. Like, see how easy it is to rent my own clothes. Why was the tunic not torn up? If it was,
Right. Yes. Right.
Rabbi, does this come where they say rent? Is this what from where we do at a funeral for?
Yes. Yes, Bernard, exactly. The verb is vayikra, and he tore, vayikra, with not any red, right, but with an ayin, vayikra. Kriya, we call it kriya, right? Tearing. Yeah. And the original custom, I don't mind the little black thing. It used to bother me, honestly, when I was a young upstart kind of rabbi, and I was like, I have standards, I have things that have to be this way. I kind of discouraged people from using that, and instead to actually tear a piece of clothing. And I still think that's actually very meaningful, because the original thing is clothing. As we saw last week when Adam and Chava leave the garden, they clothe themselves. Clothing is a peculiarly unique human thing. We need it, actually. We can't really live without it. In most climates, we would not survive without some kind of basic shelter, meaning clothing. But underneath our clothing, we're all naked, just like all the other creatures in the world. So there's when mortality comes your way, you expose your mortality, your nakedness. You rend your garment. You show that you are human, meaning mortal, right? Oh, my father died. I too am mortal. That's one of the things we're doing. So, but I've really grown to understand that little tiny garment is very, very meaningful, that little black ribbon. It has become a very meaningful, small piece of clothing. Almost more iconic than a torn garment. Like someone might just not understand that if they saw you during your Shiva with just a torn sport coat. They might notice it, but not understand what it means. But that little black thing, that's recognizable. It actually does carry a lot of meaning. So, yeah. Here, I wanted us to look real quickly at just a couple of different, this is a very modern 1981 painting by an Israeli artist. Can you see that? That's up on the screen, yes. That's interesting, a striped garment. But what does this striped garment look like?
Like concentration camp.
Yeah, like prison or concentration camp uniform. Yeah. All those old work camp songs about these stripes, right? That stripes don't always mean, what they always mean. And so here, I think the thing is, boy, the children of Joseph wore these striped garments. What does it mean to be the children of Joseph? It means to endure this too. That striped garment has a whole different connotation. So when this artist does this, I mean, I don't think this is what the garment looked like. And I think that's not the whole point of this art. But when this artist paints this way, he's asking you to see this as Joseph's inheritance. Yeah, that's kind of interesting, I think. This is a little bit more of a classic one, Ford Madox Brown. Here's the presentation of the cloak to Jacob, right? You see his brothers who are dressed much more plainly, right? This is just a plain garments, right? And here, you know, the dog, of course, they didn't have dogs. That's Madox Brown portraying this. If you look, all of his paintings look like this. It all looks like these sort of exotic people. That was how he drew everybody in his day. But you can see he adopts the embroidered, hand embellished. Wow, look at that finer work. I mean, that would have taken somebody a long time. And here is the presentation to Jacob. As he tears, you can see him, he's tearing his garment there, but that's his hands up there like this. In this picture, it looks to me like he doesn't believe them. They look like he doesn't believe us. Is he buying it? Is he believing it? And he's looking like, I'm not buying it, even as he rends his garment. And then this one, which is Velázquez, where the garment seems more plain. Again, there's the dog, right? I'm sure there's some meaning in, in Renaissance medieval art to the presence of a dog like this. You know, it means something, all these symbols. But here he, again, wailing, mourning as the cloak is presented. Okay, I got a couple other texts I want to look at. Any questions up to there? All right, let's look at the Seforno on that original verse, the Ketonet Pasim. Ve'asalo, and he made for him I'm going to say, embellished garment. That's I think, the most general way. This is what Seforno says. He made it for him as a visible sign that Joseph was intended by him to become the leader of all the brothers, both at home and in the field. So Seforno reads this unapologetically as, I think what you said earlier, Margaret, maybe this is meant to deputize him, to elevate his rank. The use of such distinctive clothing to symbolize someone's elevated stature is also found in this verse, Isaiah 22:21. There also, where it says tunic, where it signals that authority is transferred to the one wearing the appropriate garment. The Talmud also confers that authority is signaled by attire worn by people possessing it. And then he also comments, why did they dip it in the goat of a kid's blood? Right? I mean, they could have done something else, because its blood resembles that of a human being. I thought that was just interesting. That they chose an animal, that they thought would be convincing. But the main point that the Sforno there is making is, the brothers, as justified as their experience really is, this is divinely ordained. Joseph will be their salvation. They are going to starve and need him to save them. And as it turns out, selling him down the road is actually going to save their own life. They just don't even know it yet. And God, even though God is going to put Joseph through the ringer, I mean, one misfortune after the other, there will come a day where he will sit next to Pharaoh, and his bones will be carried out of Egypt and buried in Eretz Israel. So, I mean, Joseph is, you know, if we who know the full story, we can't help but see that garment as a predictor. Joseph's children will be the way that we bless our children. And if you have sons and you bless them on Friday night, you say, Yesimcha Elohim ke'Ephraim v'chi Menashe. Joseph's children become equal to Joseph's brothers. That's how important he is. His kids get that measure. So, yeah, darn right, this is an important tunic. It identifies who is the chosen one. Now, we all know, right, what happens when you identify the chosen one? All of the other people pick on him, right? It ain't fun to be the chosen one. And that is the whole point of the parallel of Joseph to the people Israel. And I think why that artist made it look like a concentration camp uniform. This is what the Midrash Tanchuma says. Observe, every misfortune that occurred to Yosef also befell Zion, meaning us. Joseph, they stripped Joseph of his coat. Zion, they shall strip thee of your clothes. And he goes through and points out that each of the things that happens to Joseph with the coat is also something that happens to the Israelites in their biblical history of misfortune and exile. Let's see a little more. When God says in Jeremiah, I remember your love and kindness of your youth when it followed me into the desert. We read that actually on Yom Kippur. Zacharti lach chesed ne'urayich. I remember the kindness that you showed me when we were young together in the desert. This corresponds to Joseph being loved by his father more than his brothers. God gave Israel the Torah according to its special status, just as Jacob chose Joseph, gave him a colored coat, and assigned him priestly duties. And when the cousins, all the Gentile nations, perceived this, they hated him, meaning the Jewish people, just as the brothers of Joseph hated him. Our sages point out that the reason the mountain the Torah was given on is called Sinai is because it's reminiscent of the word Vayisneu, and they hated him. Events on that mountain account for the hatred of the Jewish people and Judaism by the Gentile nations. Holy crap. That is unbelievable.
Yeah.
We, like Joseph, are beloved amongst the nations. So much so that our Father, Avinu Sheba Shamayim, who is in heaven, gave us a special cloak. An unbelievably rare gift, unique and special to us. It's Torah. And because of that gift, all of our cousins hate us. Why are the Jews hated according to the Akedas Yitzchak? The Jews are hated because we were given the Torah.
Favored.
Because we are favored. Of course, that's kind of true, right? The perception, I'm talking about perception, the perception that we think we're better has driven, or at least energized, a lot of hatred of Jews. They're not like us. Yeah, Barbara.
The Christians use, well, and the Muslims also use the Old Testament. Did they take it from us, or did we give it to them? Because if we shared something with our cousins, it's
Right.
not the same meaning as if they had
Right.
to take it from us.
Well, yeah, that's right. By the way, I don't say Old Testament, New Testament.
I fumbled about what to
Yeah,
say.
no, it's a hard one, because sometimes then you are you going to say Tanakh, and then you get into like using jargon that's Hebrew and stuff like that. So here's what I say. I say the Hebrew Bible and the Christian Bible. That's what I say. And I think that conveys without judgment. Like, this is the Hebrew Bible, and that is the Christian Bible. So there you go. Yeah, I look, and now we're all of a sudden we're into the realm of, you know, mythological history. What accounts for the uniqueness of the Jewish people? And I mean, if Joseph is a little bit responsible for how his brothers treated him, well, maybe we're a little bit responsible for how our brothers treat us. And if the brothers are just so blind as to see what, you know, the Ribono Shel Olam has made happen in the world, well, then the nations of the world are also blind. They don't see that the Jews are a marvelous and incredible part of history, no better or worse than anybody else, but still, nonetheless, chosen by God to give the Torah. I don't know, like, that's our story, isn't it? I mean, like,
Maybe.
maybe, right? Maybe, yeah.
Maybe.
Okay, no,
I mean, so I have a problem with the idea that this was all preordained. Okay.
Mhm.
I prefer to think that we're in the mess that we're in because of human choice and human error. That, I guess, what happened, I don't know. I just have a problem with the whole idea of things being preordained, and we're in this mess that we're in right now because there is this grand plan. But I prefer to understand it that that Jacob did a bad thing, Joseph's brothers did a bad thing, Joseph did a bad thing, and there are consequences for those actions. And that we as a people, and you alluded to this, we as a Jewish people, we are not perhaps guiltless in, or totally innocent in maybe the hatred of others, of us.
Well, I would say it this way. We don't always see our own part in the play that is unfolding. And we don't always see how our story can be perceived by others. I think that is true. But I also think, like, that's not to say we deserved it. That's not my implication here at all. It's simply to say we don't always see what's really going on in the long arc of history.
And also that people behave in repetitive kinds of ways.
Right. Patterns are inherited and transmitted by families. That's what families do, is they transmit patterns. So either thoughtfully or not. And sometimes it's very wonderful, good patterns. They also do that. Yeah, Ella.
Well, today in the long arc of history, I kind of think of Joseph as one of the first in the diaspora, and he survived as a Jew. And here we are in a diaspora. We're not in Israel, and we're surviving.
Yeah, his going down to Egypt foreshadows our going down to Egypt. And since this is a story about us, not about our ancient ancestors only, it's our story. We are going to Egypt. That's gonna happen. We're going to be exiled. And while I hesitate to see patterns in history, I also think like, okay, you know, patterns do happen, and not recognizing them is also kind of a, you know, failure of perception. I have one more text, and then I want to keep going in this direction a little bit, because I want to ask, you know, sort of where is this coat today? There we go. Legends of the Jews. The resentment of the brothers was added their envy of Joseph because their father loved him more than all of them. First of all, let there be a word of caution to any of us who have more than one child. You do not have to treat your children the same, but you do have to let them know that they are loved individually and unlimited, each of them, no matter how many of them you have. Joseph's beauty of person was equal to that of his mother Rachel, and Jacob had but to look at him to be consoled for the death of his beloved wife. Ah, boy, Margaret, I'm sure you could tell us about just how often somebody imposes on their children some unresolved issue with their parents. Oh my God, does that happen a lot? Oh, I see this child and it just reminds me so much of, yeah, except they're not that person. They're a different person. As a token of his great love for him, Joseph gave a coat of many colors, so light and delicate that it could be crushed and concealed in the palm of your hand. There's the palm again, Margaret. Hasim. It was so fine a garment that it was almost like all air. It was like a wisp. And if you crushed it up, you could, you know, like just palm it. It was that delicate. I love that. It's beautiful. But pasim has yet another meaning. It means the split, the cleft. His brothers knew that the Red Sea would be split in the days to come for Joseph's sake, and they were jealous of the glory to be conferred upon him. Joseph's coat becomes the splitting of the Red Sea and our walking through it. Joseph is given liberation from Egypt as a special gift. The special gift that the Jewish people receive from God is the gift of freedom and liberation. And I will just point out that the Hebrew Bible itself, in the prophet Hosea, reminds us that God liberated other people also, the Ethiopians and the Philistines. Other people God liberated. We're not the only ones. God is the God of liberation. This cloak, for all of the travail and trouble that it caused, it also marked and identified the beginning of a people, the descendants of Jacob and Joseph, who would be taken through the pasim, through the divide of the Red Sea to liberty, to Sinai, to a place to receive the Torah and all of its incredible stuff, as well as maybe the jealousy that comes along with it. That coat drives Joseph to Egypt. Without that cloak, Joseph is just a young upstart brother, not identifiably the preferred, and not in everybody's face and rubbing their nose in it. And so without that, he will not go to Egypt. That coat sends Joseph to Egypt. And for our story to continue, Joseph has to go to Egypt. All right, any other questions, comments, theories? No.
What is next week, Rabbi?
Next week is the 10 Commandments.
Oh,
Specifically, the tablets and the ark. We're going to look at the actual tablets themselves, not so much, the content, like honor your mother and father, keep the Sabbath day holy, right? But instead, we're going to ask about the actual tablets, the rock. What was it? What did it look like? Where was it? When does it show up? What happens to it? And where is it now? Yeah.
I hope we'll continue to just think about anti-Semitism because, the Jews were given the 10 Commandments, right? I mean, that's a pretty special thing.
Right. That's pretty
History.
special.
And so, what feelings does that engender in other people?
Right.
The whole anti-Semitism thing, because I don't. We'll talk about it next week, but I don't in a gut level, I don't understand anti-Semitism. I can talk about it intellectually, but I don't really in my heart understand it. So maybe you can help us with that.
That I will just say very quickly, and I would like to continue talking more about that. While there is a strange logic that animates bigoted thinking, but it makes sense to them when they think that way. There is a strange logic to it. I understand it. I could articulate a logical right way of thinking. Nonetheless, it is irrational. The reason you don't understand it is because it is essentially irrational. And that doesn't make it less dangerous, of course. It just makes it irrational. And so even though there is a internal logic to that kind of bigotry and hatred, it's clearly false and primarily driven by emotion and irrationality, not by reason and logic.